Hello, nerds. Welcome to the Geek Girls Story Salon, where I talk to creatives from across disciplines and across the world about the art of storytelling. I'm your host, Jen Jackalone, lifelong storyteller and head geek in charge. We've got some great guests coming up in the next few weeks, so be sure to smash that like and subscribe button to stay up to date on the heaping helpings of brain food coming your way. My guest today is author Anna K. Wrenn, professor, researcher, an author whose debut novel, Strange Attractors, is equal parts psychological thriller and romance with the twist of being rooted in chaos theory. We'll be chatting today about the transition from academia to the world of fiction writing and why she loves those ice queens so darn much. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me. This is awesome. I love the concept of this podcast, and I just am so honored that you reached out to me, and let's chat.
Absolutely. So as you know, I saw the title of your book and I screamed and pointed at the screen like the Leonardo DiCaprio meme, because I became fascinated with chaos theory about 2 years ago, and was throwing my brain at all of this reading that I probably didn't have any business doing, just trying to get my brain around it. So I was really excited to see it pop up in this sort of unexpected place. So chaos is misunderstood by a lot of people, right?
Mm-hmm.
They think it's about randomness when in fact it's almost really about the opposite.
Yes.
It's like the patterns that ripple out from relatively small things and finding repetition within that, right? Do I have that correct?
That's what I understand. Now, keep in mind, I come from a social scientific background.
Mm-hmm.
I am not from, where you saw it come through more of a scientific background. Is that chaos theory has been applied, for example, to crisis communication,
Mm-hmm.
and what happens when an organization has experiences a major conflict, a natural disaster,
Mm-hmm.
and how it seemingly devolves
Mm-hmm.
into entropy. But I think you're nailing it. Is that if you the I think the heart of chaos theory
Mm-hmm.
is if you zoom out enough, if we could get a macro enough view,
Mm-hmm.
we could see the patterns that exist. And of course, as a communication scholar, as a social scientist, what I'm fascinated about are the times that we as humans think that we're behaving in entirely authentic, new, radical ways, and we're rebelling against our past and our own
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
internalized narratives, right? And
Mm-hmm.
we're pushing
Right.
back against our parents and our
Mm-hmm.
society. And if we would zoom out, we would realize we're replicating those old patterns in some ways.
Right.
So that's why I love chaos theory, but I
Mm-hmm.
completely
Mm-hmm.
understand that I am not. I would never say that's I'm a chaos theory expert, but I do love it and appreciate it.
Sure. Well, I mean, I just thought like because strange attractors, like that's a legitimate, very
Mhm.
important kind of linchpin of chaos theory. It also happens to be a terrific title for a novel. Um, so because and again, this is my very layperson's understanding of it. Attractors are sort of the point or set of conditions that the repeating patterns keep coming back to, right?
That's what I
So
understand. And so the way it has been applied, for example, in crisis management,
mhm,
is that managers of an organization that's gone through a disaster, for example, there are these strange attractors, narratives,
mhm,
principles, values that
mhm,
will pull an organization, a culture, a community back into an organized state,
mhm,
but they're strange. You
mhm,
may not know why they are pulling you into this pattern, and so it may look random.
mhm,
Um, and I think that again applies to interpersonal relationships. Is that
mhm,
you think about the times that your life has seems to have devolved, and what are the narratives? What are the principles? What are the values? What are the peoples that pull you back into a state of equilibrium, if you will?
Mhm.
And so that concept of strange attractors is, I think, a powerful one, but one that we will constantly be striving to understand in our own lives, in our own relationships, and in
Sure.
our own communities.
Sure. So, I mean, to me, it sort of seems like your protagonist and her love interest are sort of like the strange attractors in that system that you've
I
set
would
up.
love to hear more of your thoughts on that.
Okay. Um, yeah, I mean, I was uh just sort of it was sort of interesting because, and I don't want to say too much because I don't want to like spoil for
Sure.
people who haven't read it, because I want people to go read it. But I found it very interesting the way you resolved certain things at the end and had them coming back to each other, and just sort of it seemed like you weren't going to explain certain things, and then you did. And so like so much of what happened in it was because of these two characters pulling back towards each other. It was like they were sort of anchors to these two different parts of the story that you had coming together.
Well, and I'm always fascinated with attraction.
Mm-hmm.
And whether in the social science it's attraction theory, for example, and um
Talk about that
I
a little.
um well, with attraction theory, again, we think that attraction
Mm-hmm.
is something more simple than it actually is when it's a multi-dimensional concept. So we think back to that person we thought, if we could only get this person,
Mm-hmm.
our lives would be perfect, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
we're attracted to them.
Mm-hmm.
So you think about Sonia and who Sonia's story and who she was attracted to, and the thoughts and the ideas, and part of
Mm-hmm.
this larger ambitious vision she had is that
Mm-hmm.
if I could secure this person who
Mm-hmm.
would be my mentor, who would be my partner in
Mm-hmm.
in establishing my place in this larger university, then all will be fine. Except
Right.
think about that person, and this is where I think that we're more like Sonia than we realize. Think about that person that we finally went out on the date with,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe you finally married them. You
Mm-hmm.
finally had sex with them, whatever it
Mm-hmm.
is.
Right.
And then or my favorite example is you go in for the kiss. You know what I'm
Mm-hmm.
talking about? You go
Mm-hmm.
in for the
Yep.
kiss and you're like, yes, and you're expecting your toes to tingle so hard
Mm-hmm.
they explode, and it
Mm-hmm.
just falls flat.
Mm-hmm.
And so attraction is a multi-pronged concept, but we put too much on the physical aspect of attraction.
Mm-hmm. I agree
I
with
go
that.
back to, again, attraction is a strange, strange beast. We end up with people, and we end up in places, and we end up with purposes,
Mm-hmm.
attracted to people, places, and purposes that we just did not understand, because there are, again, these underlying patterns playing out.
Right. Well, it's sort of like there's things under the surface of ourselves that we, I think, don't necessarily see. And so when you have an attraction, I think it's like you're trying to fill something there, or you're trying to smooth something over there that you can't even necessarily articulate or put into words.
Yeah.
And so like you're attracted to people who on some level you think are going to fill that need, I think.
Mm,
Right?
hmm. Yeah. Oh, and the narrative
Yeah.
that we have playing out in our head is that and a lot of that, of course, as you know, is social scripting, is that we were told that, from our lifetime, that if we had this type of body, if we had this attractive title, if we
Mm-hmm.
had an attractive wardrobe, think Sonia's story, again, everything is attractive, then you yourself will embody attractiveness,
Right.
and people not be able to resist you,
Mhm.
and that is just not the way it happens, is that there are times, again, there are people, places, and purposes to which you are attracted, to whom you're attracted.
Mhm.
It goes back to what you're saying, is that there is this underlying mechanism, or there
Mhm.
are underlying mechanisms at play that you simply may not understand
Yeah.
about why you're attracted.
Yeah. It's interesting. My ears sort of pricked up a little when you said social scripting, because I think there's so much what it comes back in a way to identity and how storytelling is important to personal identity, because what are we as people except the stories that we tell ourselves
Nice,
about ourselves, right?
nice.
And so it was interesting to look at Sonia and look at her narrative of herself and just see all the stuff that she's just not seeing.
And in many ways, it is truly a tale of a woman's attempt to not only survive, but to
Hmm.
thrive,
Hmm.
which is powerful. I mean, you think about where she came out of and how she recreated herself,
Hmm.
and then
Hmm.
she gets to this place where she is supposed to be. She is embodying her narrative, the narrative that she has been telling herself
Hmm.
since her early teens,
Yeah.
and now she embodies it, except it's what we all discover, right? Is that we follow those social scripts, we follow those cultural narratives, and even sometimes when they diverge from
Hmm.
our interpersonal narratives and from our personal narratives,
Hmm.
and we go, okay, well, I'll follow the cultural narrative, and then we arrive, and whether it's in the penthouse in New York, whether it's in that small, classroom in Indiana, or you're a medical professional in Sydney, Australia,
Hmm.
and suddenly you're wondering why it is you feel torn asunder, you feel torn up instead of you
Right.
feel completed.
Right. It's like, okay, I was told, or I told myself the narrative that this was going to be the thing.
Mhm.
And you get the thing, and it turns out it's not the thing, and you feel almost like, you know, robbed because
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's this author, she's a psychologist who studies mindfulness, Tara Brock, and she
Mhm.
says, we are a horrible, I'm paraphrasing loosely, we're a horrible predictor of what makes us happy. We're just horrible at it. And in part, it's because you think about it, is that we spring forth from the womb,
Mhm.
and we're fed all of these narratives and all these scripts
Mhm.
about who we are and how we should be and our larger place in the world. And
Mhm.
then we arrive and we wonder how we feel a deep sense of unease or even often betrayal.
Yeah.
I saw it all the time, and I won't get a lot into this, but I saw it a lot of times with teaching for decades, teaching, late teens, early 20 somethings who,
Mhm.
and we all go through this, who thought that with the right title, with the right degree, with the right job, with the right car, with the right house,
Mhm.
that they would feel like they would arrive. And then that realization that you really have to stop and look at these narrative pills you've been swallowing, if you will, and you have to look at the scripts and you have to say, okay, do I want to reconceptualize these scripts now? Do I want to reject some? And that's a whole other level of work.
Oh
Talk
yeah.
about chaos.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, and I think, especially like women of our generation were sort of
Ooh,
sold this whole bill of goods about, you can have it all and you can do everything. And, it's like, well, do I really want to do everything and have it all? And, I mean, I'm at a point in my life where I've worked into something that really works well for me. But it took a minute to get there because I had to sort of shed all of that programming about what it was supposed to be.
And I think that's it. I think that is um the boldest, the strongest, the most courageous acts are those quiet moments of letting go, of saying,
Absolutely.
wow, I don't think I'm going to be what I imagined, or I'm going to be a different version of it.
Hmm.
And allowing you really doing the work to letting go some of those narratives, and that's why I love characters like Sonya. I get the main complaint about Sonya is that she's unlikable. Well, there are a lot of women, a lot of powerful people who contribute monumental, or would
Hmm.
contribute
Hmm.
monumental things to this world, if we get over this whole concept of likability.
Hmm.
But with that said, she has her own work to do, right? She's so brave and bold in resisting certain
Hmm.
scripts in
Hmm.
certain narratives, and
Hmm.
yet she's like all of us. We all have the puppet strings attached to us. And
Yes.
how do we
Yes.
clip them? How do we let them go and
Yeah,
realize that they're holding us they're holding us hostage?
indeed. One of the things that well, I mean, it's pretty clear from Jump that she's profoundly damaged. That she's really got some scarring, and that was things that even happened, going back to her teenage years and the stuff with her mother. But I think that the thing that really clued me in that, okay, we're in for an interesting ride with this person, was when you introduced her mother's voice as the
Mm,
voice in her head, the negative.
mm.
We all have the negative self-talk voice, but hers was her mother's, and it was very distinct. And I went, oh, okay. Um, but it's
And a lot of
interesting.
that too is calling us
Hmm.
to listen. In scripting theory, we talk about it, the intrapsychic scripts. What are the scripts that we carry around in our head that dictates what is normal and appropriate?
Hmm.
And some of these diverge from larger cultural scripts.
Hmm.
Some of them converge. But we all carry around these voices, or most of us do carry around
Sure.
these voices.
Hmm.
In my years of teaching, I've never encountered and doing research, I never encountered a human who didn't carry around a
Sure.
multitude
Sure.
of voices in their heads.
Sure.
And yeah, and we carry that voice that represents the trauma,
Yeah. And
even though
her
we think we're all put together and we're all good to go.
the most self-aware people that I know tend to be the ones who are very aware that they're not together. um but it was very interesting to have that toxic internal voice be such a loud thing for her, to the point where it really was almost its own character.
Mhm. Good.
um
I'm glad you saw that.
yeah.
I'd like to hear more about that, what you were thinking about that.
Well, just I think there was, it just made very clear, like when it first sprang up, I thought, and then I saw it again, and I said, okay, so this is really something that this is not something. It's almost, the baggage is so big, it's almost external, that she's dragging it around in a suitcase behind her.
Mm,
um and she has positioned her whole life in opposition to that voice, like her whole outward presentation and the whole way that she's put her life together, and her expensive wardrobe, which I loved, by the way. Had I been live blogging the book, which I'm going to start doing in the future. But had I been live blogging the book, I think every time, every time there was a little wardrobe description, I think I would have had to say something about it.
That's great.
The furniture but the furniture too, but really the clothes.
Well, and I'll tell you between us,
Mhm.
I still get advertisements from the
Because
vendors
you had
and
to,
from the
because of all the
brand, and I'm
research,
going,
because of all the
folks, I
research you had to
cannot
do.
afford a cashmere, sweatpant that
Right,
has a top that's
right,
also a shawl.
right,
I'm going,
right.
I appreciate you thinking that I could, but
But yeah, no, like, yeah, when the Louboutins finally came out, I was like, oh, there they are. Like I had been waiting for them because I knew she had them.
you had to know. I
Yeah.
keep waiting for the conversation
Uh-huh.
where Crystal says, okay, we need to talk about finances. I see, to me, that's the real conversation. The real conversation, as you know, we do so much with, let's have a conversation about sex and sexual satisfaction and what does it for you, baby? What are you attracted to?
Mm-hmm.
It's like,
Mm-hmm.
no, let's get out those statements and look at how much debt you are in, and let's look at whether our philosophies on finances again converge
Right.
or diverge.
Right. Yeah, because Crystal obviously has a much more practical approach to things, I would think. Um,
I would think too. But I will say about you know Sonia's her trauma
mm,
is that the very ways, I mean, again, I don't think, here's really a question for you. I mean,
okay.
does anybody get out of this world without scar tissue?
No,
Emotional, psychic, spiritual, physical scar tissue?
I don't think so. I think some people get an extra helping, um, but it's very hard. It's very hard to even quantify that stuff, you
Yeah,
know?
it is. But I think that for me, and a lot of this has just been working and doing research and teaching across populations, is that seeing the variations of scar tissue
Mhm.
and how people adapt to it, and how some people decorate it.
Mhm.
The powerful work with some breast cancer survivors, for example,
Mhm.
who create art from their mastectomy scars. And then you have other people who uh who cover it up, and that's not necessarily bad. Is that, again, if you're going through chemo and you want to put a beautiful, I met this beautiful woman who I interviewed her, who's going through chemo, and so she would put a white silk scarf over her head. Other people go, they go bald.
Mhm.
So we all have ways of interacting with our trauma.
Mhm.
Some of us dress it up. Some of us make art of it.
Mhm.
Some of us, frankly, try to conceal it from ourselves included.
Mhm.
And to me, and this is where you really nail it, to me, when we conceal it from ourselves, that's where we risk re-traumatizing, adding scar tissue upon scar tissue. There's a difference between, we sometimes have to conceal our scars because, frankly, society punishes people with scars.
Oh yeah,
We don't always celebrate it.
right.
So if you have scars, emotional scars, psychic scars, spiritual scars, physical scars, there is no judgment of going, okay, you've got to make a decision
Mhm.
about to whom you share those scars with. Uh, but do you have an authentic relationship with those scars?
Mhm.
And uh, I, I'm interested in what readers think and how they interpret how Sonia interacted with her scars.
Oh gosh, well, I mean, I think I said it in the message that I sent you yesterday. I was talking about how she clearly doesn't have a realistic sense of what's going on under the hood with all of that, because she's holding on so tightly to everything that she's really continuing to do more damage. And even though she's, um, quote unquote, hard to love, um, you do sympathize with her. And like, I mean, I know I found that I spent most of the book just like praying for her to like just let
Please.
go and stop doing that. You see everything that she's doing and you're like, okay, I understand where this is coming from. I understand that you have this damage, but you're compounding it by being this way.
Well, and I love the word that you used in our previous communication. You talk about um, you know, unclenching. And I think that that's why so many the number of readers have they're talk about bifurcation is that the readership has really been there is a quite a stark delineation. Readers either just really dislike her from the start,
Mm-hmm.
and go, you know what, I don't like her, she better redeem herself.
Mm-hmm.
And then I've got another group of readers who like her from the start, and or value her from the start, and see what's happening from her perspective, why she's making choices.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and you do hope that she unclenches. I think sometimes you hope that she unclenches,
Mm-hmm.
so that the readers also can unclench.
Right.
But
Right.
I think that the readers sometimes we clench up when we read her, and I certainly clenched up when writing her.
I
Um, oh my gosh!
was
And
she difficult to invoke, like to get into that voice and
yes and no. I
okay.
think okay. Uh, I don't think you go into communication or into social sciences without a desire to see the complexity of people.
Mm-hmm.
And so I very rarely look at a person and go and not find some sort of beauty to them. Now that's gotten me into trouble, like it has pretty much other people, because sometimes it's like, oh, maybe you shouldn't have seen so much beauty. For Sonia, uh, I mean, to me, the fact that she figured out a way to thrive. Now, I think you've again nailed it.
Mm-hmm.
She's thriving in a in a way that is I think is a narrow thriving. But a
Mm-hmm.
lot of us do that, right? Is that we thrive in a relationship because the relationship makes us look good socially. It gives us a good bank account, maybe. I think about the number of people that I've met over the years. I think about my friends. I think about even myself. It's like how we thrive, but we thrive in a very narrow way. And that if we would just look at how we're again interacting with our scars,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes that means tearing out the scar tissue. Sometimes that means decorating it. Sometimes that means forgiving ourselves for having been in a place where we got scar tissue, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But I think that what you've really talked about, and the difficulty about invoking her, is that she has just such a narrow way of thriving. It's
Yes.
about titles, it's about power, it's about the designer armor. lipstick that is $100 for a tube of lipstick. But yet, how
Right.
magnificent is that, that whatever she did, she was able to work her way up the ranks.
Hmm.
She was able to survive. Now, back to your question, was she difficult to invoke? Not necessarily, because I've been honored to see women of all shapes and sizes, in shades. And again, I'm talking about not only physically, I'm talking emotionally and spiritually, and watching people figure out how to live in this world, and then figuring out how Sonia lives in this world. And so she was, in many ways, I could get into her. I saw her from the start. Now I want to tell you what was difficult was when I got into her, because I'm a bit of a instead of a method actor,
Mm.
I'm a method author.
Hmm. I
I
get
don't
it.
know about you.
Hmm.
I take on the energy of my characters, which
Hmm.
is very dangerous, because I think to be able to write a fully fleshed out character, you have to dive in them and see them inside out. And so there were interactions that I would have where I realized I had just been editing that weekend, and then I had taken her energy into the workplace, and I was channeling her energy. So, back to your question, was she difficult to invoke? Uh, no, she was not difficult to invoke. I know she's difficult to sometimes to take in and to see the beauty of her. But boy, I'll tell you what, she was more dangerous than anything, because
Mm.
she really started to skew my way of thinking sometimes, and I would have to pull back and say, no,
Mm.
this is not you. This is I used to jokingly say, what would Sonya do? Well, we know what Sonya would do. She'd buy $100 pair of $100 lipstick, drink several glasses of Pinot, and she'd rake someone over the coals. But there are consequences.
Sure.
There are consequences. Is that did I answer your question on that
Oh,
one?
yes,
I kind
absolutely.
of just blabbered there, but
No,
it's such an
it's
interesting
no,
question.
it is because yeah, I mean, I to some extent, and I think anybody who's really doing this with seriousness does try to sort of sink into their character's head a little bit to write them effectively. Um, and for me, certainly, I've found that there are characters that I had more trouble than others sinking into. But it's interesting, like you described, I've had one or two where I've been able to sink into them pretty well,
Mhm.
but I had to sort of be careful with how much time I spent there
Oh
because,
yeah,
you
that's
know,
good. That's
because
good.
there was a lot of stuff that I didn't necessarily want to be carrying into the rest of my day-to-day life. Um,
And that's a conversation I think that really is an interesting for the future, is that
mhm,
I mean, what's our ethical obligation to ourselves? And I used to do this when I would talk about uh I did storytelling research, illness storytelling, for example,
mhm,
how to bring forth, how to create a situation where people feel comfortable to give you their stories. But
mhm,
when I would also teach that, I would teach about, okay, what do you do when you become the vessel for someone else's stories? You matter too, and
right.
you take that energy on. Your question is such an excellent one, is that to me, Sonia, going back to your S word, she is sympathetic.
Mhm.
I really like Sonia. Now, would I want to work with her? I want to be very clear.
No, but
And
yeah, go
but
ahead.
there are other characters
Uh-huh.
that predators, um, unrepentant predators,
Mhm,
um, masochist, sadistic narcissists,
mhm,
malignant narcissism. I have a really hard time. like sinking into a character because I don't want to take that energy on. And then how do you feel empathy for someone who feels no empathy, and actually delights in someone's suffering? And so those are the characters that I have a hard time invoking.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I get that. I don't find myself in the position of writing POV for those type of characters very
Mhm.
often. Just because I don't enjoy it. Um, I wondered, because I do want to talk about the Ice Queen trope, because I feel
Okay.
she does fit that,
Mhm.
but there's a lot. I mean, the Ice Queens are typically, they are kind of damaged people. Usually there's something lurking under the surface that makes them the way they are. But you really took a deep dive there. Do you feel like she still fits that, or do you think she's kind of in her own category?
Um, I'm such a huge fan of Ice Queens. I love what Fiona does with House of Agnes. I love, Lee Winter's Ice Queens,
Mhm.
Quinn's Ice Queens in something different, or Ice Queen in something different, for example. So I love Ice Queens, and I really respect the Ice Queen trope, if you will. I do think that Sonya, the way I put her into Ice Queen is that's what she invented herself as,
Mhm.
is an Ice Queen. However, yes, she's a humanized Ice Queen,
Mhm.
in the sense that I do not have readers look away from the reality of what's underneath the surface of
Mhm.
the Ice Queen, and maybe sometimes the pain that's there.
Mhm.
I mean, you think about what society. I often think about where, it doesn't matter your politics, but what we do with female leaders, and how our female leaders cannot be competent. They must be above all likable.
Mhm.
And so the pain that sometimes competent women, I think, have. And then I think about competent women who are just damn smart. They're just damn smart. They're
Mhm.
good at strategy, but
Mhm.
they're not good at humor. They're not the one you necessarily want to have mimosas with, but they are the ones you want to avoid war. And so I think that with any kind of quote unquote Ice Queen that I do,
Mhm.
is I'm very much interested in what's underneath the ice.
Mhm.
Uh, and and so I think she's in that trope, but I do understand where people go, wait a second.
Mhm.
Uh, Anna kind of diverted a bit from the trope.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I feel like it was very effective, but I think, what do you think it is people love about that trope?
Ice Queens.
Mhm.
Oh, love that question. Um, I think competent women, going back to what I said, I don't think competent women have always been rewarded.
Mhm.
Their competence was devalued.
Mhm.
It's the whole, what Aristotle, a woman could be, in essence, intelligent or fertile, if you
Mhm.
would.
Mhm.
And so I think that, why aren't we drawn to the woman who says, screw the world, screw the cultural narratives, screw the backlash. I am going to be someone who not only is feared,
Mhm.
but people are still compelled
Mm-hmm.
by me. People are still drawn
Mm-hmm.
to me. I guess, and I want to hear more from you on
Okay.
this really question.
Okay.
I think that also, don't we hope to always be the exception in the Ice Queen's book? Isn't that part of the thrill of the Ice Queen?
Right.
Is that we get to see Sonya's story rip up the world,
Right.
rip
Right.
up the world, but
Right.
somehow Crystal is able to get through
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
journey through the ice cave,
Mm-hmm.
and so I think that we always love that idea of, wait a second, there is this woman
Mm-hmm.
who is so competent, so
Mm-hmm.
intelligent, that she's
Mm-hmm.
able to push back against the BS this that cultures heap on
Right.
women.
Right.
But then, oh my gosh, wait, you must be extra something good to be
Mm-hmm.
able to melt
Mm-hmm.
an ice queen.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
Lee Winter, and the Villain series. One of my that will go down as one of my all-time favorite, right? Is that
Mm-hmm.
Eden is she's not just a cuddly, little panda. She's smart. And she's able to do this kind of political gameplay and activism
Mm-hmm.
that it grabs the Ice Queen's attention. So
Mm-hmm.
you have to be extra special to get the Ice Queen's attention. What's your
Yeah.
thinking?
Oh, I think, yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely, there's something to that. When with the best kind of love stories, or the most satisfying kind of love stories for me, are the ones where the barrier to entry is super high.
I love it.
So I do like
Mhm.
a story with a good ice queen.
That's me.
Um, but my biggest, my joke when I talk to my husband is, when we watch TV together, my joke is, I'm not interested in a couple if they haven't tried to kill each other at least once. Um, enemies to lovers, I will absolutely cop to that being one of my top tropes.
And mine
Um,
too.
because again, it's the same thing. The barrier to entry is so high. So
Yeah.
like there has to be something special about this connection to get past that, to get to, the relationship or the whatever it is that they're trying to achieve.
Well, I guess, is it something that's just like more it's just gladiator battle in a different arena, that it just is you put in two competent warriors who have different skills,
Mm-hmm.
and they're able to hold their own, and one is not able to defeat the other so easily,
Mm-hmm.
and so maybe that's really what deep down is that, I although I like mixed martial arts. I sometimes I like boxing, for example, but um to watch people pummel one another, I'm not as interested in,
Mm-hmm.
but to watch two opponents who are masters in their own way,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
battle it out, and that at the end, there
Mm-hmm.
is that bond, there is that intimacy that is unassailable.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's what's in the Ice Queen trope.
Mm-hmm.
It is that there are two people that they're just differently abled, and and if it's and if it's done hopefully well and with respect, they're both not only still standing at the end,
Mm-hmm.
um their beauty um is showcased even more because of the battle that they fought against one another. It's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I think you got something there.
I'm not sure. Well, I could babble on forever and a day about it, but I know that you have other questions. Just
I
have to be careful because I tend to go,
mhm.
"Ooh, that's a philosophical discussion. Let's continue to hammer that out for another 2 hours."
Right. Well, yeah, we could do that because this is my show. So, um, but yeah, there were a few other things that I wanted to get to. So, um, I do want to know because of course, are an academic. There's actually two questions I have specifically around that. Are any of the characters in this book based on people you worked with?
Well, and you know this being a writer
Mhm.
yourself, is that I think that there are DNA particles from everybody that we've
Hmm.
ever met.
Sure.
My characters are fictional.
Hmm.
However, they have DNA particles from
Hmm.
so many people I've met. And I think Sonia, in many ways, is a tribute to the women who have survived
Hmm.
in sometimes male-dominated worlds.
Hmm.
Now, by the time I emerged in academia, um, there was a generation of women. There was a generation of professors of color, for example,
Hmm.
who were able to come in. But you think about the generation before that, and when I was coming up through school,
Hmm.
it was one maybe one tenure track female, and I was surrounded largely by cishet white males, and I learned a lot. I had a lot of great mentors, and we viewed the world through different lenses,
Hmm.
and privileges. And so all of that informs my book. So no, they're
Hmm.
not based on anybody in particular, but they are based on a a richly lived experience in academia,
Okay.
and some ugliness that I've seen, but also just some resilience and true commitment
Hmm.
to your discipline,
Hmm.
because you truly have to be committed to your discipline sometimes to put up with what you have to put up with, especially those
I,
early generations
mm,
of women academics.
mm,
Some of what they had to put up with, but because they were so committed to the discipline. I like to see, I know that again, Sonia's not, again, quote unquote, likable, but I really see it as a love letter to
mhm,
all the ice queens that I met in my high school, elementary school,
mhm,
college, master's
mhm,
program, and my
mhm,
PhD. I love
mhm,
them. Mwah. And the crystals of the world, the ones that are like, let's get through with poetry, let's push back against this world. Let's resist it, but somehow do it with more tenderness and vulnerability.
mhm.
That's amazing too.
Yeah, I loved her. I thought she was
Most people do.
terrific. Yeah.
Like, love her.
Yeah. I mean, in some sense, it was like I wanted Sonia to get it together for herself, but I kind of wanted her to get it together for Crystal also. Um, so coming back to your background as an academic, and I say this because I know a lot of authors who wrestle with the idea of wanting what they write to be quote unquote taken seriously or be
Mm.
considered, respectable authors, quote unquote, when, really they just you want to write about gay superheroes or billionaire
Mhm.
detectives solving mysteries or whatever it is that makes them happy. Um, do you or did you grapple at all with that coming from academia? Did you feel any pressure that you had to produce quote unquote literature? And or I mean, I think this is a fantastic book. I think it's beautifully
Thank
written.
you.
Um, you could arguably call it genre fiction.
Mhm.
So I wonder, did you feel pressure about coming from that background that you had to produce quote unquote literature?
Well, what I love about, and this is going to be my Appalachian pronunciation of my publisher, but what I love about Ilva Publishing is there is a commitment
Mm-hmm.
to quality, but there is also a commitment to authentic storytelling. And
Mm-hmm.
so the fact that I don't write under my professor name, the name that I
Mm-hmm.
did all of my nonfiction, all of my social scientific research,
Mm-hmm.
they wanted me to have a pen name, and I think that that's wise. That was wise counsel,
Mm-hmm.
because it frees you up from this. Well, wait a second, are my colleagues going to read it? Are my colleagues going to? And yes, some of them do. And then I get scared because
Mm-hmm.
I'm sitting there going, no, I promise you, this wasn't a hit job on you. This wasn't me sitting there in the faculty meetings going, I'll just wait, my pretty. I shall get you in my book that I'm writing. Um, I more than so I came out of a field where I wrote social scientific research.
Mm-hmm.
And so with under Anna K. Wrenn, it truly is not about being an academic, although it is informed by academia.
Mm-hmm.
And eh, but what I write under Anna K. Wrenn is instead of respectability, it's about respect. That's my big um, that is the pressure that I feel. And what I'm talking about from respectability is I'm not concerned about necessarily social status or to be socially acceptable. Because I'm about critiquing all of my work, both as an academic and then as a novelist, is
Mm-hmm.
about critiquing this world and saying, hey, are we sure we want to do it this way? And I want the characters to go, wait a second, do I have to do it this way? Is there another way? Am
Mm-hmm.
I making myself unhappy?
Mm-hmm.
Um, am I my own worst enemy? So I love characters that question. I don't know that I will ever be a respectable author who generates respectable books, but what I will always strive to do is create a respectful book,
Mm-hmm.
meaning it is respectful of myself,
Mm-hmm.
of my communities, and the authors or the readers.
Mm-hmm.
And this is that sacred relationship to me.
Mm-hmm.
A reader chooses to give you their time. Wow. Yes, their money, but their time. And we don't have an awful lot of time in this world. And so what I always strive to do is to respect myself and to respect those readers. I know am I always going to deliver something that they like? No. But respecting them. I never want them to walk away and think that they felt like I played games with them
Mm-hmm.
so that I could make money or get prizes. I never want them to feel like I wasted their time. That they walk away and go, yeah, this is not for me, that's fine. But if they walk away with the feeling that I misled them,
Mm-hmm.
I played a game with them
Mm-hmm.
for my own gain,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I'm not into that. So I'm not as much into, I don't have to worry about literature because
Mm-hmm.
again, I don't write under my professor name.
Mm-hmm.
But I am into books that respect instead of respectability.
Mm. Great answer.
Great
Um,
question. I love the
thank
question
you.
because I mean, let's face it. Let's get blunt with one another.
Okay.
We would not be writing if we did not want our work to be seen. I mean, or we would
Right.
write in our diaries, right? And we would put them under our bed,
And that would be that.
and that would be that. But we're daring to put it in a place where people pick it up
Mm-hmm.
and invest in it. Um, so I will never be one of those people who says reviews don't matter
Mm-hmm.
and reader feedback doesn't matter. Now, I need to tell a broader story rather than to appeal all the time. And because I also know that reader feedback changes. You know, you think about that movie that you hated when you were younger, or that book you hated when you were younger, that later you were going, oh, now I get it.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, yeah,
yeah.
I have books that I've read, at three different points in my life, and I've had three different experiences with it because of where I was. So yeah, absolutely.
And so reader feedback is always, and reviewer feedback is important to me.
Hmm.
And place in society, of course, is important
Hmm.
because we're social beings.
Hmm.
But no, respectability is, uh, I'm just not a very respectable. Even as a professor, I didn't take myself too seriously, although I have an ice queen persona. But I'm about, let's talk about scandalous things because they need to be talked about, not because I want to be the most popular.
Okay.
Um, and let's be authentic. I just love authenticity. So I do wish, though, I could be a little bit more Dr. Sonia Story and I can put on a uniform, don't get me wrong, but I can't wed myself to a persona.
Mm.
Um, I am always authentic. So that's why I'll probably never be a highly respectable author.
Mm.
Too authentic.
Mm. Um, yeah, well, I am in some, that's also me, to be honest. I'm really bad at being anything other than myself.
I mean,
Um,
I know it's a cliche, but we say, that whole adage of be yourself, because every other role
mhm,
in this whole human play is taken except the one you're embodying. So
mhm.
that's who I am.
Excellent. Okay, so I want to talk about a couple of other things. I know we're going to go over the hour. I don't know how your time is, but
I'm all yours.
okay, fantastic. So I wanted to talk, and I read the blog post actually on your site or on your website about your mom being sort of relieved that the sex wasn't too
Oh, goodness.
graphic.
That's still one of her biggest compliments to me
I'm
is,
sure she
and
thinks
she
it is.
repeats it. And she was never, I want to be very clear, this is one of the coolest people I
Mm-hmm.
have ever known in my life.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you want to talk about pushing back against culture.
Mm-hmm.
She could be an ice queen, but she's
Mm-hmm.
also amazingly authentic. I It has cracked me up the number of times
Mm-hmm.
she has made it a point to tell me how, and I love the word tasteful, how tasteful that it wasn't offensive. And I was like, who are you? What is this? You've suddenly become this. Are we going to go to tea and wear white gloves? And what are we doing? Do we have our Sunday bonnets on? I don't understand. But so yeah, yes,
Yeah.
apparently it's very tasteful and non-offensive.
Oh, well,
Not my goal, but
not the
okay.
goal, but I did find it interesting that I mean, and I'm certainly not shy about, I've written some fairly smutty smut in my day and whatever. But I do find at the moment, at this particular point in my life as a writer and reader, that I tend to be a little bored by it. Like just like graphically smutty smut for smut's sake. It's sort of like, well, how many ways can you write about sucking on a titty?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, you know, I was
Oh my God.
struck
That's amazing.
by how you did it because it wasn't particularly graphic, but was really evocative. And that's kind of what it needs to be. So I'm just sort of curious, like, how did you settle on the approach that you took with that?
Well, first off, I have to point a little bit to, or quite a bit to,
Mhm.
Lee Winter did this great blog post
Mhm.
on the Oval website uh, about about writing sex scenes and that, you know, knowing your characters, knowing your purpose.
Mhm.
And so ultimately, when I write any kind of scene, and I think this cuts across any kind of vulnerability, right? And
Mhm.
sex, that's what it is. It's about vulnerability. If in
Mhm.
some ways, if you're doing it right,
Mhm.
because we can wear masks, of course, during sex too,
Mhm.
and sex can be a non-intimate. But the kind of sex that I tend to write about now, and I think you're exactly right. It's fascinating watching it change.
Mhm.
You talk about those relationships. You've read a book 3 times and had a different relationship with the book. It's
Mhm.
to me the same with writing sex. Is that I used to write. Number one, I specialized in women's sexual health, for example, in as an academic. So I used to do workshops and research, and so and teach it, and there is nothing that is prudish about me.
Mhm.
uh I can say all the body parts. I used to make my students say all the body parts and say they had to actually start rehearsing them. If they felt that if clitoris, for example, brings a flush to your cheek, I said
Mhm.
you better start rehearsing it, because practicing it, because you don't want to get into that vulnerable exchange and then someone says clitoris, and then you blush and it shuts down the entire exchange.
Mhm.
Especially if you're talking about illness. So back to your point, is that I've had a different relationship with writing intimacy depending on where I am. And again, there's nothing prudish about it. In my 20s, I tended to be a lot more, what you were saying, a lot more visceral, a lot more graphic.
Mhm.
And then I think that as I've written more, um, the purpose of my books and the purpose of the sex scene has started shifting.
Mhm.
And it is really about, sometimes about dominance, control, sometimes about connection. So for example, with Sonia's story, um Lee Winter was my editor on it, and she kept pushing me, and rightfully so, about what is this scene supposed to do. And with Sonia, going back to your first question about like invoking Sonia, I'm going to tell you this because I think you're going to understand it.
Okay.
When I first started writing the sex scenes, she wouldn't let me. And if you're in that energy, in a character's energy, I know that sounds wackadoo,
No,
but
it
if you're in that
absolutely.
character's energy, you're in bed and you're Dr. Sonia's story, you think she's gonna allow you to suddenly put her in all these vulnerable,
Mhm.
she's gonna allow oral sex? You think she's gonna allow someone to go down on her?
Absolutely not.
I mean, that is vulnerability to the nth degree. And so
So
the
was
way
it
that I,
was it a hostage negotiations kind of
well, you
situation?
know what? It was a little bit.
Okay.
I mean, there was a reason, let's get her drunk now. Let's get her drunk, and then let's put it in abstract, because you think about
Mhm.
it, and this is, and not being funny here, but survivor research, for example, it
Mhm.
is not uncommon to disassociate from your body. If you are a trauma survivor,
Mhm.
you are likely at some point going to disassociate from your body. Well, why the hell wouldn't
Right.
you
Right.
disassociate from your body when it comes to one of the most intimate vulnerability producing acts? And and this is someone who, you have to, I guess, decide. I think we all have to do this, right? During the sexual
Mhm.
act, is that, okay, am I just going to put on another mask and another layer of armor?
Mhm.
And now you're going to perform instead, or are you going to be in this sexual act? Well, no, she was not all about it. So she had to be intoxicated,
Mhm.
and it had to be abstract.
Mhm.
That was the way that to talk about sex from Sonia's point of view
Mhm.
early on. It's all about control or being controlled.
Mhm.
And so that was why, it to me, the sex scene, it wasn't strategic. Um, it was about respecting the voice of the book and the
Mhm.
voice of the character.
Mhm.
Uh, I will also go to something that you said
Okay.
that I find profound,
Okay.
is that when you talk about as at this point, at this stage in your life, and
Mhm.
I think that is so key, that
Mhm.
we've got to have a diverse array of women's voices,
Mhm.
and understanding that sexuality also changes across the lifespan.
Mhm.
So what does that look like in books? I mean, does it have to look like, you lift them up and you pin them again, then you put the
Mhm.
strap on, and then you're like, and then you bend them up, and it's like, wait a second, this is someone who's, in their 50s, 60s, whatever it is. And
Right.
so you're really getting out the strap on and you're putting their
Right.
leg over their head.
Right.
And
Right. Right.
that's so performative.
It
And
is.
and to me, and I'm not saying this about any author, I'm not pointing fingers. To me, it's it's playing that game with readers.
Mhm.
It's playing a game with readers instead of saying, I trust you. I've established a relationship with you in the book.
Mhm.
Um, can you be with us during this scene too? And can you
Mhm.
understand that sexuality comes
Mhm.
in a lot of different colors and
Mhm.
and qualities,
Mhm.
and can we capture that
Mhm.
as well in our book? So I love your question, but no, there is not a prudish bone in my body. Um,
Well, I didn't necessarily think that there
oh,
was, and then I sort of stumbled on that. Looked at that blog post, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. So,
no, and I didn't feel that in your question. I thought it was a very profound question. It's one that I've gotten
mhm.
uh, from a very select few. I've gotten that question, and I think it's a really good question. It opens us up for a larger dialogue, which I love to have. By the way, last point
Okay,
on this.
okay,
Um, One of the big influencers.
hmm,
I love Milton's Paradise Lost. I
okay,
read it. Now, whether I would pick it up and read it right now and love
hmm,
it,
hmm,
probably not. But I read it at a pivotal moment during my teen years. He taught me that sometimes the more abstract the language, the more powerful the impact, because the reader then can read into it what they want to
hmm,
read into it.
hmm,
Because going back to your really apt example, is that if you spell it out and talk about nipple play, and you talk about anal play, and you talk about, and you so it's really graphic, and I understand that can be powerful and political and important. It really
hmm.
can be.
Sure,
However, sometimes too, the reader, if they're there and they hate nipple play,
that
let's
can take
say
them out.
they've just given birth or something, their nipples are raw, or
Hmm.
something's happening, they have hypersensitive nipples. Now, instead of being aroused,
They're
they're
like,
like thinking about how sore their nipples would be.
right,
So
right.
I love, and I think that you're going to find this across all my books,
Hmm.
is that I love metaphor and
Hmm.
abstraction.
Hmm.
To me, it respects where the reader is.
Okay.
Another long answer.
No, I like the long answers. It's you know, I mean it's a legit conversation. So um, you know, I mean for me, like I find a lot of it too is like you said with Sonia, it's like sort of respecting your characters and what they want. Art of the Chase, my protagonists are, you know, a divorced couple.
Great title.
And thank you. And you know, I make it very clear throughout that they had a very hot marriage. And, you know, that they had a little bit of a sub-dom dynamic and, you know, it was
Nice.
lightly kinky and whatever. But like I make that very clear, but I don't sit there and spend whole scenes talking about exactly what that involved.
Yeah.
And, you know, because it's not really important to the story. They kind of made it clear to me, okay, you can do this, but not this. And this is fine, but we don't want it on camera. You know,
I
um,
love that. I love that imagery of us sitting in a conference room,
right,
fluorescent lights with our characters, and they've got, you know, we've got legal representation, and they're like, okay, you may not mention the following body
right,
parts
right,
or
right,
positions.
right.
That's funny.
Yeah.
That's good. And then when is the Art of the Chase coming out?
Oh, that's October, I think. That's or at least
That's great.
that's the latest that I heard. So we'll see.
That's exciting. And so are we going to see some enemies? Enemies? Are we going to have some gladiatorial, the
Oh
too
yeah,
strong?
yes, because it was quite a bitter divorce.
Wow, this is sexy exciting.
Yeah, it was quite a bitter divorce, and they're thrown back together now to chase this thief that escaped them, who was actually sort of the catalyst for things falling apart and them getting their divorce.
Hey, if anybody's listening to this, we're hearing a scoop. This is a bestseller. You hear it. This is a bestseller. Oh my God, that's awesome. Art of the Chase coming out in
Yep,
October.
October.
Some
So
lovers turned enemy, maybe back to lovers, huh?
that's what I'm going for. See, I like to have it flip in interesting ways.
Good for you.
Like it's technically a second chance kind of story, but really there's a lot of bickering and you know that sort of sexy tense like ex-lover bickering that you know
That can be hot. That can be
I
hot, right?
I
Because
I
we often poke
I
and
love it.
prod with words
Hmm.
before we
Hmm.
poke and prod body parts.
Indeed,
So
indeed, exactly. But yeah, so I want to know because this is the first novel of yours that I've read. I know you're probably working on the next one already. Um,
yes, I am.
so
It's
the,
fighting me. I've got it. Can you see the bruises? I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm up to this one chapter that is just I was telling someone I hope is going to be my beta reader.
Mhm,
I said this one chapter I'm on is like a mean girl. It's
mm,
like what I hate, you know, the sexist language there, but
mm,
you think about like the movie Mean Girls
mhm,
and some of the books like Queen Bee
mm, mhm, mhm.
Odd Girl Out.
Yep.
But this is that one moment you think that I'm at the chapter, one moment you think you're on friendly terms, and the next
Mhm,
moment you got your
mhm.
teeth kicked in.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so I am working diligently, but yes, it's putting up the good fight. I will be in that conference room later with some of my
Okay.
characters.
Okay. All right. Well, I wish you the best of luck for the
Thank you.
negotiations. Um, so does Strange Attractors feel like the direction for the stories that you're going to be telling in the future, or are there, I guess, are there parts of it that you feel like are definitely distinctly representative of you as a writer?
I it and you'll hear me say this
Hmm.
you know over and you'll hear me say this repeatedly.
Okay.
Um, I will always write about complicated women from complicated backgrounds in
Hmm.
complicated situations. Period.
Sounds good.
I love women. I love women who are multidimensional. They have smooth parts and jagged parts, and silky parts and rough parts.
Mhm.
And so, I will not write the same book repeatedly,
Mhm.
because the characters just won't allow that. The characters just won't. And I don't think the life experience that we bring as an author allows that.
No.
It's that whole, and this from being into storytelling, is that whole concept of there's the story and then there's the story that is told.
Mhm.
And that's why a story is never the same. It is never the same. How is it told? How is it consumed? So even then, I always go into the more darker fiction, but not because I'm trying to pull some sort of stunt,
Mhm.
or be the queen of Southern grit or anything like that. I'm not trying. It's that I find that women, and I really don't mean this as a cheap answer. Women are at their most beautiful, their
Mhm.
most sacred, their most profound during the darkest times sometimes. I mean, that's where you really, and I know that, when we are in dark times, we don't feel necessarily beautiful and sacred and profound, but
Mhm.
you think about those dark times that it truly peels back
Mhm.
um some of those layers. You have to going back to you have to you have to shed.
Mhm.
If you're going to get through that dark time,
Mhm.
you have to figure out what you're not going to carry through. What are you going to draw?
Mhm.
And so I'll probably Strange Attractors is its own unique book.
Mhm.
Sonia, I love to write from the perspective of an unreliable narrator, difficult woman. I don't think we do it enough.
Mhm.
And I so appreciate Ilva Publishing for touching a book that a lot of people wouldn't.
Mhm.
Um, However, there are so many stories for complicated women and complicated backgrounds and complicated situations to tell, that I won't have to do the exact same book. There will be a rich array. Um, but I think that those themes, I will always touch on darker themes. I
Mhm.
told you early on, I am such a big one. Growing up, I was oh, this is a topic we're not supposed to talk about. I think
Poke,
we
poke,
should
poke,
talk
poke,
about it.
poke.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
again, because it's like you think about, we suffer in silence as people.
Mhm.
We're not supposed to talk about race. We're not to talk about sex. We're not supposed to talk about gender, queerness. We're not supposed to talk about feelings,
Mhm.
vulnerabilities,
Mhm.
flaws. So yes, I will talk about them all. That's what I do. That's what I do.
And I think, well, and I think that, it's valuable to have that stuff in the world, right? Because people need to be reminded that these things need to be talked about. They need to be reminded that, yeah, there is something to be gained. There is something valuable in going through these dark times. Um, I think, I don't know if sounds weird to say, but I think in a way it's like we almost overvalue happiness and being
Oh, I
happy all the
100%
time.
agree with you.
Yeah. Um, and so that actually sort of ties into my next question, which was, it feels like it feels almost like that's your sort of unified theory of you as an
Yes.
artist.
Yep, you got it.
Hmm.
Nailed it. And whether it's in nonfiction, whether it's in fiction,
Hmm.
I I love again the complicated women and complicated situations, because this is
Hmm.
also when we talk about, you get a chance to go, what am I shedding?
Hmm.
What is too heavy to carry through this really heavy time?
Hmm.
But it also, I think, being in darkness,
Hmm.
We talked about the beginning, scripting theory and cultural scripts. In the
Mhm.
darkness,
Mhm.
we not only see our own luminosity, we see the threads that have been attached to us by these cultural expectations.
Hmm.
And so, that's why, yes, as an author, I will never steer off, and this is not a dig against anybody. I will probably never steer off into um, that really fun, cute beach read where everybody's sexy and young. And again,
Mhm.
I'm not digging at anybody because
Mhm.
sometimes people really want just escapism
Mhm.
and they want to believe that these hot young characters are having great sex and that when it ends on page 251 that the happily ever after is truly a happily ever after, that hot people will remain hot and in love forever in their days. And I'm like, I think that escapist, I think that that can be radical,
Mhm.
showing happy endings, especially in
Mhm.
populations that
That
have
don't
been
get
had to,
them.
yes, have had to swallow very, very bitter pills. I think about characters who have been trans and characters who are characters of color who are often been
Mhm.
um, the characters that were moving the hero forward. Their death moves the plot forward. And
Right.
so I think that the
The
that the happy, beautiful, beautiful queer characters of color, I think is so important. And I will probably never write those.
right. Well, and and that's the interesting thing too, is that like even the fluffy stuff that that we might want to write can still reflect what we value. And I mean, that's true certainly for me. Like, not that I write that much fluffy stuff, but I do occasionally. Um,
I have such mad respect for people. You could give me the fluffiest plot with the fluffiest characters. And like you pick up a book by Jay, for example, and it's textured.
mhm.
Um, but it's not gonna traumatize you to read one of her books. When you pick up a book by me and it's like, oh gosh, hold on. It's been an end of a long day and you need to curl up. I mean, I might be not the character, but if you don't want to be so alone in the world
Right.
because you're feeling flawed and fragile
Mm.
and you're feeling like the only freak in the room, that's where Anna K. Wrenn comes in. Maybe,
Okay.
maybe.
Um, all right. So I think we probably should look towards winding it up. Did
Yes.
you bring anything for show and tell?
Oh, I did not bring anything for show and tell. What do I need to bring for show and tell?
A passage of any writing, whether it's fiction or whatever, something short that was inspiring to you or important to you.
Um, oh, and I missed that
That
part.
that was it was in my missive, but you may have missed it, so that's
I
okay.
apologize to you. I saw the question about what am I reading now?
What are you
Uh,
reading now?
well, so I just finished Rosalind Sinclair's. For some reason, I keep wanting to change her name to McIntyre. Rosalind Sinclair's The Lily and the Crown. So I do want to talk about when you said show and tell.
Okay.
I do want to talk about that
Okay.
because it incorporates poetry, not in a major way,
Mm-hmm.
but when you talk about bring something for show and tell or something that inspires. The Lily and the Crown is such a feast of language,
Mm,
and it is so poetic. And I don't know her.
mhm,
I suspect she is quite well studied
mm,
in poetry.
mhm.
And so I if you love language as I
I
do,
do.
I love descriptions, I love
Mhm,
descriptive
mhm,
phrases, as you
mhm.
know, I love
Yep,
metaphor.
yep.
And Lily in the Crown is such an awesome version of that. But if you go back to Strange Attractors,
Mhm,
you'll notice that while I could not quote Audre Lorde, for example,
mm,
Crystal quoted Audre Lorde, and
mhm,
poetry is so important, and this
mhm,
language,
mm.
the exquisiteness of language. So I really highly recommend that people pick up The Lily and the Crown, but also pick up poetry, please.
Mhm,
Pick up poetry and read your Mary Oliver, read
mm,
Audre Lorde, please.
mm. Yep.
Um,
Okay.
and you want to talk about Audre Lorde putting people, her women are often in
Mm,
very difficult
mm.
situations, but then
Yeah.
she'll also talk about lovemaking.
Mhm.
Um, and so poetry is my show and tell
Okay.
today.
Okay. Um, I'm actually very much a poetry person, but
Wonderful.
we would be going on for another 15 minutes if I got started
And
on that.
apologize to you if I'm about missing the show and tell. I feel like I missed a real opportunity there, and I read over. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you for the information you sent me, and I apologize because that would have been a real wonderful opportunity to showcase maybe reading some Mary Oliver poem,
Okay.
because I don't know about you, I actually try to read poetry before jumping into a um, a segment
Mm,
uh, of editing because it
mm.
frees you up.
Interesting. I should try that.
Matter of fact, I
Mm,
can, don't hold this to me, but I was reading Rosalind Sinclair's
mhm,
finishing it up last night, The Lily and the
mhm,
Crown,
mhm,
and she referred to the that we so much focus on the rock and how strong the rock is,
mhm,
but it is the plant that roots in the rock that really in many ways is the stronger one, and I think that's
mm,
Rumi.
mm.
Rumi is the one, so I think that she is
She's
signaling how steep she is in poetry, but Rumi was
mm,
the one
that
who
said that.
talks about
Mhm,
that the rock must crumble. It's the crumbling rock that yields the flower.
mm,
And so we love to be impenetrable and
mhm,
strong,
mhm,
Dr. Sonia's story, but
mhm,
it's the rock must crumble
mm,
for something to truly grow. So
mhm.
that's my show and tell for you.
Okay. Well, as I may have mentioned, we finish up with a lightning round. I am going to give you a list of tropes, 2 by 2. Don't think too hard about it. Just tell me
Okay.
which one you like better, okay?
Oh, I love it. Okay, go.
All right. Okay. Friends to lovers or enemies to lovers?
Enemies to lovers,
Yes.
gladiators in the ring.
Yes. Fish out of water or trapped between worlds?
Mm, both, but my instinct is fish out of water. Oh,
Okay.
but both of them.
Okay.
Oh my God, fish out
Okay.
of water, both.
Okay. All right. Love triangle or forbidden love?
Forbidden love,
Okay. Red herring or twist villain?
Oh, you read Strange Attractors. You know I love both. Oh my gosh. That I know you said lightning round. You can't do this to a
If
communication
you had to
question.
pick one.
Twist villain. Fine.
Okay. Okay. Couple more.
Okay.
Chosen one or unlikely hero?
Unlikely hero.
Okay. I know the answer to this one, but sympathetic villain or hard to love hero?
Oh, I love a hard to love hero.
Uh-huh.
And let's really make sure that we have female anti-heroes
Mm,
in our literature.
mhm.
The anti-heroes just don't have to be males.
Okay. Last one.
Okay.
Fake dating or only one bed?
Only one bad.
Only one bed always wins.
Well, because it's also, I mean, in many ways, I think that we've all had that
Mm-hmm.
where we've had to share a bed.
Mm-hmm.
And isn't that a great metaphor
Mm.
for the fact that we all share the earth?
Mm-hmm.
And if we could just make love, not war.
You getting all hippie on me?
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit.
All
But you
right.
know that it won't stay light and it won't stay light and airy. You know I'll take it dark
No,
places.
I know. I know. I know. All right. Well, I'm going to let you go because we are way past time. But this has been so much fun.
Thank you
Um,
so much. It's been awesome.
yeah, thank you for coming on. I will let you know when we go live.
Wonderful.
And yeah, so thanks everybody for listening. Check out Strange Attractors. It's available on Amazon. And if you're watching on YouTube, visit the link below to check it out. I have been your host, Jen Jackalone. Thanks so much for tuning in, you awesome people, and stay geeky.